Good evening. On behalf of the Master of Fine Arts program in creative writing, the English department, and the Greensboro Review, it is my privilege to introduce tonight's poetry reading by my colleague, Emilia Phillips. I would also like to encourage you to order a copy of Emilia's new book from our friends at Scuppernong or here at the University Bookstore, and perhaps, I'm sure, Emilia might sign the book for you at another time. As you know, Emilia Phillips is a member of the MFA faculty in creative writing and is the author of 4 full-length collections of poetry, Signaletics, Ground Speed, Empty Clip, and now Embouchure. Each one of these books more dexterous and provocative than the last. She's also published 3 chapbooks as well as scores of poems and lyric essays in the magazines everyone wishes to publish in, including American Poetry Review, Agni, Poetry, the Boston Review, Ploughshares. She's a regular reviewer of poetry for the New York Times. Additionally, among other awards, she's recently won a Pushcart Prize and a North Carolina Artist Grant. And further, she's assembling a collection of her lyric essays that we will want to watch out for. Embouchure, the volume we are celebrating this evening, as a word can mean to put the mouth to, as in the case of the mouthpiece of a horn. In Emilia's case, most likely a trumpet that once blown into creates a sound that resonates as musical notes. Many of the poems I admire in this collection are like that in the process of placing one's lips to the mouthpiece that is the sound and sense of the poem that pushes the air through the mechanisms of the instrument until it emerges as lyrical music. For these poems that not infrequently contain elements and threads of narrative and story ultimately seek the condition of musical thought. Years ago, a teacher of mine, John Anderson, said that he wished that in his poems he could talk intelligently about emotions, a thing that requires a deep sense of mind and body. That is something I find so agreeable in these poems of Embouchure that are not only smart, and on occasion smart-ass perhaps, yet always acting in concert with a willingness to engage the body and its manifold desires and follow Phillips's unquenching curiosity. Sometimes I leave the poems wondering what's happened to me. I thought I knew where I was, and then I found myself somewhere else, which led me back and then took me to another place where I needed to be without my knowing at first. I discovered I really needed to be there. I'm so glad to be there and here with Emilia Phillips this evening. Let us all welcome her here, and I'm glad to see all of you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart. That was incredible introduction. And thank you all for being here tonight. I know that here-ness, that is the state or quality of being quote-unquote present, has changed for so many of us in the last year. And I just want to give a special shout out to those of you who are joining in your jams with a glass of your favorite comfort, stuffing pizza in your face, which is what I would be doing if I was watching instead of giving the reading. I'd also like to thank those folks who are here with me in the room tonight on the campus of UNC Greensboro: Terry Kennedy, the MFA and Writing Program Director, Stuart Deschelle, my wonderful colleague in poetry who has not only mentored me through fun things like promotion and tenure, but also taught me the difference between Champagne and Clément. Michael Springer, one of our soon-to-be graduated poets who has the technical wizardry to make all of these readings happen virtually. And last but not least, my partner, Soy contigo en todos mis poemas. I'd also like to thank my other colleagues in the MFA and Writing Program, Jesse Van Reenen, our Assistant Program Director, and our lively band of fictioneers, Jeanette Aliu, Holly Goddard-Jones, and Derek Palacio. Thanks also to the Department of English, the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Program, and the College of Arts and Sciences. To my students, thank you for your curiosity, your kindness, and your brilliance, your anger that drives you to want the world to be better, your endurance at this particular moment, and the way you make my job feel meaningful every single day. Thanks also to the team at University of Akron Press, including Mary, Amy, Thea, and John. How have you stuck with me for 4 books? Also, hi, Mom. I still remember the first time you heard me read, and I told you that you would appear in one of the 2 poems I was reading, and how after the reading you asked me which one it was, and I said the one that said my mother in it. I hope you hear you in one of the poems tonight. Thanks also to the rest of my family, which I don't necessarily conceive of as solely or even a majority of a biological construction. That family includes my dearest friends, chosen families, and my dog Grady. It even includes an awesome 16-year-old poet who is probably writing better poems than me already, and a 10-year-old who once came with me to the beginning of the year program barbecue and wanted to talk to everyone, and as we left, announced in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, I was such a hit at that party. So this is it, my 4th book of poetry. I'm going to read 10 poems for you this evening, and in case you're like me and really like to know what you're in for, it'll be 10. So I'm going to start off with a poem called Some Sentences Need to Be Written in the Passive Voice. And I really see this poem as a bridge poem between my last collection and the current collection because it deals with some of the topics of the 3rd collection in that it deals with gun violence, suicidal ideation, and kind of moves into this book, which is really about self-acceptance, but also a kind of self-realization and even self-deprecation. So this is Some Sentences Need to Be Written in the Passive Voice. Once, when I thought I was dying, I lived next to gunshots on Saturday mornings, a neighbor's practice on cameo targets. I'd pull the dogs inside by their collars, and I'd read or half read or pretend to and think about walking out into the line of fire. Sometimes the brain's funny like that. You pick up a can thinking it's cola, too sweet and maybe a little flat, only to wind up with a mouthful of your mother's cigarette butts. Half my life has been a bait and switch, and my body the biggest worm. Once I wasn't and still was. Later, I wanted something which was an improvement. I wanted to make love to a woman, but there was only a man. I laid still beneath him like a trapdoor that wouldn't spring. And then she told me I made her dizzy, and I became That's when I realized the tongue and heart are the strongest muscles in the human body. So today on the internet, before teaching class this afternoon, I looked up, is the tongue actually the strongest muscle in the human body? And I learned from an article on the Scientific American that the tongue is actually 8 separate muscles working together in tandem. But here's a fun fact. This is completely aside from the reading. This is a quote from the article. I just thought you might find it interesting. Because the tongue is all muscle and no bone, it's very supple, boasting a huge range of motion and shape while preserving its volume. It's kind of like a water balloon, says Dr. Tasco. If you deform it in one place, it's going to pop out in other spots. So now I can't stop thinking about the tongue as a water balloon, and perhaps even more distressingly, if it could pop. Anyway, food for thought. This book is all about speaking plainly, about queerness, about the body, sex, one's internal life. And that's why I'd like to go all the way to the beginning of the book, to the epigraphs, the first from David Ferry's translation of the ancient Sumerian epic Gilgamesh, and the second from Prince's 1982 song, Little Red Corvette. And I thought they made a very nice little rhyming couplet that marked this book's movement toward vulnerability. Let us go back down from the mountain, down to the plain. Girl, you've got an ass like I've never seen. So now let's get to the gay poems. This one is called They Called Me Unladylike, and it goes out to all of the former tomboys and current tomboys out there. I need a sip of water before this one. They called me unladylike. My rat's nest versus my grandmother's liberal spritz of no more tangles versus the 80% humidity like breathing through a wet blanket versus my cap band sweat and palm spit to backslick the way an angel does before visiting the dying miraculous. Then it was the boys' relaxed fit and the infield dirt that made mud quick in the glister on my calves. I slid safe, I slid out, my nickname, the hat, what else? I cupped my hand to my damp armpit to rue the silence flatulent and twirled my gum on a finger, the flavor green apple. I didn't offer any to any boy, no Eve, no knots. I fell asleep chewing cow with its cud and woke nuanced. Then there was the haircut with my blunt-nosed scissors, and then the correction outsourced to my grandmother's beauty parlor, where I was sweetie and hun and a handful. My mother tried to glove her cusses in front of me, called a man who cut her off dip-dong. And then one Sunday, I told my father that Joan Jett looked rode hard and put up wet, gold-beaked parrot of my overhearings. He threatened soap and a striped backside. I ate with my mouth open. I ate until I was overfull. I burped in chorus with my friend Heather, who smelled like buttered rolls in my bed at sleepovers. I did cartwheels on the occasion of dresses, and I wedded every unmarried mother in their blame games of house. I seated my imagination. I spread my legs wide as the Colossus of Rhodes wherever I sat. My heart was as full as the butt pocket of my jeans I stuffed with my father's old wallet, stuffed with Monopoly money, hundreds only. I was a soldier and a cowboy and a cop. Then my hope took the bit and was broke on the bra, big enough at first for my whipped meringue and a little shadow. Then I rose like dough and my worth was an abacus of pearls I was told to sweet pinky from boy to girl. I did everything I was told. I made myself thin as the edge of a quarter, my fruity low raisin to shy whisper. I kept my eyes averted and screamed at spiders. There were men who requested skirts for quick access, men with curled lips who said eating pussy was for pescatarians. But now, after my patience went first to salt and then to drought, my belt's as soft as a rose petal, and I let her tie me up with it, so I can't stop her from telling me how beautiful, how strong my body is with the whispers of her hands. I'm trying to remember that I deserve love like this, that my body isn't unrequited. I am whatever I want. A woman in a knotted tie and boxers. Love tells me she loves my cock because I can take it off whenever we are ready to redress or sleep. Her cheek on my right breast. In my dream, I am the Colossus with conquering limbs astride from land to land, no less an image of a god than a goddess. So this next poem I'm going to read, I published in an online journal, amazing journal called the Adroit Journal. And I was a little nervous about publishing it online. I kind of thought, oh, I want this to be hidden in a print journal somewhere. But then I thought, no way is my high school crush on a girl ever going to be revealed to her by publishing this poem online. No way is she ever going to encounter this poem. And then, well, you can imagine what happened. And I got a message from her. Someone she knew who was into poetry, who didn't know that we knew one another, sent her the poem and said, haha, look at this poem with a character named Hope in it. And that was that. So here is one of the first girls on whom I had a crush was named Hope. I once believed in God. An intelligent design at least, but I also believed my youth was for mistakes. And so I kept a fake journal in case I was ever called into the principal's office again to see Mrs. Wood with her New Balance on the desk, her gray muumuu slipping back to reveal a bunched ankle socklet, white as a symbolic lamb. More unyielding than St. Peter at the gate, she, of course, didn't believe in saints or girls having sex. And so I wrote my fiction in bed, temptations conquered with my boyfriend and not his bass player's fingers slipped under my skirt on the band bus while coming back from a game, his sweatshirt covering everything like a well-made plan. But there were other things I couldn't admit to myself, much less lie about. She was one of them, hope. Sometimes I like to imagine her as an allegorical figure like Justice or Fortuna, but instead of the accoutrements of a cornucopia and blindfold, her arms would be covered in disappearing tattoos that constellated the classroom daydreams of whoever looked upon her. And she'd hold a radio antenna, a voice for the dark hours. I bought CDs she liked, Blink-182 and Weezer. We were friends, I said, and then we weren't so much when she became popular, and I was jealous of Phantoms, of her copy of Anna Karenina, well-worn and foxed as the image of what could be, the future like an unattended dance, the one at which everyone else is. But our school didn't allow dances. One teacher said girls could get pregnant from dancing, and I remember Hope and I laughing together on the way to our next class. If she was a sentence, she thought she was a question I thought was rhetorical, but the world really wanted to know the answer. So sticking with the classroom theme, I'm going to read a poem that kind of touches upon one of the other themes in the collection, which is toxic masculinity. And I offer up this poem to my students, former students, and future students who are teaching or who want to teach. This poem is called To the Young Man Who Always Sat Quietly in the Back of the First Literature Class I Ever Taught, who gave me a poem comparing me to a commonly hunted bird. Pheasant was my breast, my gait. You might as well have said game, said fair. Believe me, I already know well inadequacy is a buckshot hunger I'll never fill. I didn't need a reminder that I must stand in a room full of gazes, some of them male. My body engendered foul by this gendered foul. When I finally confronted you, all on my own, spine rigid as a talon, you said you were just testing me, to see if I was cool, to see if I would report you. I did, but you didn't know. You didn't know because no one did anything except tell me it was my fault for not establishing my authority from the get-go, that, let's be honest, I look so young. You are the only student I ever feared. I told tenured professors in chairs you made me uncomfortable because of the way your eyes locked like a missile, and I showed them your scribble in red ballpoint, the doodle of a fluffed hen. But back then, I was just an adjunct, a junk job with no support, and every one of them led me back into the hall and said you were likely harmless. And because you never did anything else, they felt confirmed, I'm sure. But I know better what harm is, the different ways a hand can write violence onto a body. One of my superiors, leaning out of his office and stroking his mustache, shrugged his shoulders and let me go with a final piece of advice. Just don't let them know you're afraid of him, he said. Just don't cow. This next poem, I was thinking about Dickinson's death as bridegroom. So then I was thinking about what he would have been like as an ex-boyfriend. And this is called Poem About Death, beginning with a humble brag and ending with a shower beer. Shower beer and shower coffee, just FYI, are fantastic stress relievers. Today, for once, I did not think of death. I avoided him like all men in public by pretending to read, by putting in my earbuds to drown out his "I still need you, babies" with Patsy Cline's "I go out walking." I watched the unglued soles of his black Converse high tops pass in front of the bathroom stall into which I'd retreated when I needed to decompress from teaching. But I didn't say anything, only fished in my purse for a pink clonazepam that had spilled out into the bottom with all the pennies and single sticks of gum. "I have to take this," I said, when he later approached, and then I helloed into my phone, although it hadn't rung. I tried to look busy all day. I answered emails I'd been putting off, and I even remembered to say, "Thank you for your patience," instead of "sorry for my delay." I invited students into my office to ask about their summer breaks, and I heard about a job pet-sitting 4 dogs, 2 cats, some sea monkeys, and a snake. I asked a student if she had to drop mice by their tails into the hot tank. They were brown and frozen in bags with freezer burn on their noses. I remembered then that snakes smell with their tongues, remembered one flick against a glass enclosure. I remembered then what it was like to be kissed by death, his tongue like an old limp carrot left too long in the crisper drawer. Sometimes I imagine sticking it into one of those old-fashioned pencil sharpeners mounted on the wall. The sizing guide, the little crank, the shavings coming out in coils, you know. Once, when we were together, death forgot my birthday. I had to plan the party and smear the cake with buttercream myself, but death took all the credit. He was often like that, a man of consequence, some would say. He never laid a hand on me, but any time I told him he had hurt me, he would say, "I don't know what you're talking about." I began to think that maybe I was making it all up. "Maybe you are," he said, without moving his lips. And I began to worry he could talk to me telepathically. That seems like something death could do, I reasoned. But maybe his voice in me was me too. It sounded funny after all, a little off, like Bob Dylan in the late 80s. His voice just starting to turn to wet concrete. Most of the time, I don't think about death, except when he drunk texts in the middle of the night or happens to run into me buying milk. Sometimes when we make love, as he liked to call it, I was too drunk to say no. Sometimes when I was under him, his sweat dripping off his brow and stinging into my eye, I would think about a woman and how she tasted after we walked around the city for hours, finding every excuse to delay returning to the hotel room we could barely admit we had for reasons we couldn't say aloud, even to one another, even though we both knew. Today was a small triumph. As I said, I didn't think of him at all, but I can't say he wasn't there, isn't still. Here in the muscle after I've undressed, in the brown bottle at my lips, in the hand on my breast, and in the steam I inhale. This next poem is called "I Have Anxiety About Anxiety." "Listen," said the hem of my right pant leg. "I might unravel unless you worry I might unravel." So this was my long-term strategy for keeping planes airborne, a slipstream of possible outcomes. And after the worst, the afterlife, 2 choices, lightning held in the body forever, or else a mouthful of milk curd. But now my heart says nothing except too much, when the nurse listens with her little finger, eyes on her watch. Every bit of news is carried on the backs of invisible pack animals. I feel the donkey kick turn my breast to smushed eggplant. I worry about my worry. I revise it like a web, which means I have to thread it over doubly complicated. "Excuse me," said the fire that had not started, sometime in the middle of the night. "Well, here we are again," I said to the dark, to the smell of smoke I invited in from the cold of memory. A fire that's never been started is the hardest to put out. Sometimes I drink a whole French press and wonder why I'm sweating incessantly. Maybe the cancer's returned, or else you'll stop loving me. Sometimes I imagine the inside of my body like the interior of a fable. My heart's a cocoon and its night moth can't break free. So I alluded to a little story earlier, and they called me unladylike poem about telling my dad that a celebrity looked, rode hard, and put up wet. Thanks, Mom, for that one. When I was about 10, 12, something like that. I didn't know what that meant, and so here's a poem that explores that. This is called At 11, I described an aging female celebrity to my father as looking rode hard and put up wet, and it's an apology to Joan Jett and also to Monica Lewinsky. I thought I was talking about horses. I thought my mother had been talking about horses, the way they sweat when you ride them hard, that oily sheen on their coats like curing cast iron. I wanted a horse so bad I checked out the newspaper during library time, copying the classifieds onto the back of my hand, gelding, 11 years old, 15.5 hands. On Sundays, his day of custody, my father sometimes took me to a nearby farm to ride, and there on the back of Ariel or Carlos or Nan, I'd imagine myself on my future ranch with my husband, Brian Oakes, the boy who sat 2 rows away and whose father taught us how to balance a checkbook during one junior achievement lesson. When I said what I said, my father threatened soap, and then he threatened my mother. He said, parrot, into the phone. He said, just like. I was also fat, and Brian knew it. My father knew it and said, more exercise or else. I did jump rope for Hart, the presidential fitness test. My Republican father, a McCain man, did a Bill Clinton impersonation as we drove the 12 hours to Florida. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. I heard she was fat. I heard out of all the women from women, my mother included, and me then. I'm sorry, Monica. I'm sorry, Joan Jett. I thought I was talking about horses. I thought beauty ran wild somewhere else. So I'm going to read the title poem now, or the poem from which the title comes. So embouchure does refer to the way that you approach the mouthpiece of your wind instrument. I was a trumpet player from 3rd grade to my senior year of high school. It's also the muscles that you build up there. So this poem is called, I used to get boys to kiss me by bragging about my embouchure. One more sip of water. I called my silver-plated trumpet Bella because I was uncreative in naming beauty. I should have called her double entendre, a good name for a losing racehorse or a bar. I sat outside of Babes in my running car, unable for minutes to go inside, which I'd promised myself, 1 beer annulled by thirst and done. I must have tasted like tarnish. More than once I scrubbed the smoke gray ring kissed on my wasted lips by the mouthpiece. Bee stung after practice, its red color in the blood swell, a bruisey penance. And still I was amazed by my body's suddenness, its prodigal repossession when I kissed her black lace suggestion, and her back bridged the who I was with the who I am, small twins disguised in rejection of their ridded other. I gave myself dimples, bragged that all those staccato triplets gave me a quick tone. I was second chair. The boy in first told me once that he'd never masturbated because God was always watching. I wanted to ruin him. No one was that good. He would judge me if only he knew everything I ever wanted. which is why I also wanted to ruin myself. My only weapon was denial. My only ammunition, my body, my beautiful, beautiful body that didn't know yet how to contain itself. So our penultimate poem this evening is going to be one of the weirdest poems in the book, if these haven't been weird enough for you. And the title is probably the longest poem, or longest title in the book. It's called When the Phlebotomist Stuck the Needle in Me. I looked away only to see on a TV on which a chef was injecting pork loin with marinade. So this really happened to me at the American Red Cross and made me pretty sick feeling. All right, let's jump into it. In love, I am effusive as an opened artery. No, as gravy on flat china, with nothing, no biscuit or hard crust bread to sop it all up. And when am I not in love or hungry? But in that moment, I was eaten by dread, my stomach like a pot-belly goose egg rolling in the boil. I chewed my cheek, sucked my lip until my mouth went wet again, and I could swallow the thought of being cruel sinew, a machine of hunger, overseen by a guilt computer. Bright and glistening maw with a bitten tongue, purpled at its suture. When I gave you up, I ate a lot of chocolate, the cheap milky kind, and let it dissolve on my tongue as slow as spring to come. Sometimes having a body feels a lot like being fluent in a written-only language, something I could never say with the taut bouquet in my throat. I once knew a guy covered in tattoos, from the hairless mounds of his slender ankles to just beneath his starched shirt collar, who fainted whenever he had to give a little vial of red. The phlebotomist tells me it's always the men who faint, never the women, and I believe it. Some boys in my middle school coughed cottage cheese whenever I wore a skirt, which was every day. Their disgust with a body unlimited. In a private browser, I watch a woman bite another woman's ass, her stretch marks inlaid like mother of pearl. Desire is the blue flame of the world burning into my skull. Sometimes I imagine eating the eyes of men the way some people relish the eyes of fish, briny as food served on posied china, resurrected from a shipwreck. Thank you all again for being here tonight. I'm going to read one last poem. It's a very short one, and it leaves us on springtime and on joy. This is called Pathetic Fallacy. Thank you again for being here with me tonight to celebrate this book and this life. Pathetic Fallacy. The sap that I am, springtime makes me want to reread Virgil's Georgics while eating cacio e pepe with fresh-shelled peas. This morning over coffee, I watched a video of spinach leaves washed of their cellular information and bathed in stem cells until they became miniature hearts, vascular hopes capable of want to roll down a hill of clover, to cold spoon chrysanthemum gelato, or to stop whenever their phones autocorrect GPS to God. The sublime is a suspension of disbelief. The earth has gotten sentimental this late in the game, with its smells of gasoline, rosemary, and wood smoke, the Rorschach of vitiligo on my eyes, mouth, and throat, the ongoing argument between self and selfhood, the recognition of the storm, the howling wind. I wish I could scream into someone else's rain. Thank you.